Hi everybody, I hope you're keeping well and thank you for checking out my talk at the Ukie Virtual Student Conference. My name is Vicky Potts and I'm a studio co-founder who went straight into my own business right after graduating before going on to set up a game development studio. So I thought I would share 8 lessons I learned from going from student to studio, which are things that I wish I had known when turning a university group project into a real business. So I run Whitepot Studios with my partner Adam, and we are an indie studio based in Belfast, where I am here in my isolation chamber, but normally we're based in a games only co-working space called the Pixel Mill with about 7 or 8 other local indie studios. At Whitepot we have a core team of 5, so that includes both co-founders, our programmer Robbie, and 2 super talented artists, Amy and Matt. We do a little bit of everything, including offering our own design and development services to other studios, as well as making our own IP. We're currently working on an astronomically relaxing constellation drawing game called Stargazing for mobile, and most recently we were part of the 2019 UK Games Fund for our multiplayer social deduction game Murder at Malone Manor. We are so close to release for Malone Manor, so if you like games like Werewolf and Town of Salem, please do join our Discord at discord.gg/whitepot. Okay, plug over, I promise. To tell you a wee bit about me and why I'm talking to you today, I'm 28 now, but when I was 11, I was making really ugly GeoCities websites about my real life pets and virtual pets as well from that game Pets with a Z. I'm not sure if any of you will actually be old enough to remember that, but it was a really wholesome PC game with a really active community of modders who would share stuff that they'd made online. So that was my first experience of modding and coding and stuff, and I didn't even really realise that I was doing it. Fast forward from there, I studied computer science at Queen's University Belfast, started exactly 10 years ago this year, which is kind of scary when you think about it. But that's where I met my co-founder Adam, and we both graduated from there in 2015. When we graduated, we worked on a business for a year that spun out of our final year group project for an entrepreneurship module with 2 others in our class, and then after that we set up Whitepot Studios. So this is not my first rodeo, I say at my second rodeo. I'm going to talk a wee bit about how I was able to get involved with the business side of things while still in university, and then how things changed after graduation. My degree was a 5-year course with a year of work experience in the middle, which I definitely recommend you do so that you can see how a real world office works before you think about setting up your own. So my first lesson is get some real world team experience, and if that's not an option, you can still get some experience by contributing to a real world team through an open source project or a hackathon, as long as it's something you weren't forced to do as part of your university course, just so you have that experience of working with others before you start your own studio. Here is a picture I took of my group project team in final year while we were rehearsing a presentation. As you can see, they look absolutely thrilled. Our final year class was very small. There's only like 15 of us in total because it was an optional master's year. But one of the things that differentiated that extra year from the undergrad part was the entrepreneurship group project that we had to do. And the final grade for that was based on how well our group pitched our idea in a competition against another university. So given that this was a technically focused course, and out of those 15 students, we were made up of a handful of people who had stuck with both the computer science and game development degrees for an extra year, you can imagine that it wasn't popular that this module was mandatory. So if you are thinking about setting up your own studio but don't like the business and the pitching side of things, trust me, you are not alone. But don't worry, you'll probably end up liking it anyway. So yeah, our first business started with that group project, like most student startup stories do. We were a team of 4 and we called ourselves Avia Labs. Our business idea was a companion app for museums and venues that would use Bluetooth beacons to tell you what was nearby. The idea itself doesn't so much matter as the fact that we were mixing the technical side of the degree and those development skills that we'd always used with some new real world business skills that we hadn't used before. So I think it's really important that you get comfortable with the business fluff, like how to pitch, how to write a business plan, what does a budget look like. It's not fluff once you get into it, so at least make sure there's someone on your team who knows that stuff inside out. And if your course doesn't give you any opportunity to undertake a real world module like this, take the time to see what's offered by your university in terms of support. Which brings me on to my next point. Through doing this module, we ended up really going all in on our project as a viable business idea. Perhaps it was my desire to avoid completing my dissertation at all costs, but we really threw ourselves into it and got involved with the university's entrepreneurship support services, and the local city council had a programme called Belfast Enterprise Academy as well. We should have just stopped there, but every single business programme or opportunity, we just grabbed it. But we definitely didn't choose all of those programmes wisely, and we ended up doing a lot of pitching competitions, like an absolute ton of them, like way too many. So my next lesson is don't say yes to everything. Make sure you find a balance between pitching your idea and working on it, as in a university context the two can overlap, especially if you're being really encouraged by peers and mentors to put yourself out there. At the same time, don't obviously sit in a corner and work away on something and forget to show it off. Just try and manage your time as best you can. For me personally, the most two useful sort of business support programs we engaged with as a student business, it was the local council Belfast Enterprise Academy programme and the university's own entrepreneur support. So do check and see what your own city or county or university offers for students starting up their own business. After a pretty stressful final year of doing way too much, we graduated, and then we set up the business for real, which meant incorporating it with Companies House and legally binding all of our souls together forever. No, it was actually like quite straightforward. You can do it online. So, yeah. Something we were definitely guilty of at that point though was still treating the business like a university project when it really wasn't. We were still using the same Trello board and stuff from when it was a student project, carrying on our typical student sleeping patterns. And although that is an upside of working for yourself, we had secured a place on a really good local accelerator program and had to adjust to the real world fast. We were no longer those students sitting around rehearsing for a pitch one night way too late in uni. So with that in mind, my next lesson is that you need to make that mental switch once you graduate. Uni is not the same as a business. If you're graduating and going straight into your own thing, just make sure you've got that mental separation between, okay, this was for uni and now this is real life, and how am I going to monetize this, rather than just enter competitions or get a good grade for it. Being aware of this transition is like half the battle as well. So now you know. Speaking of being in the real world, it's good to be aware that after leaving such an important period of your life like university, after a while not all of your team is going to want to be living this like hashtag startup life anymore. So that brings me to my next lesson, and that is know when to call it quits. So sometimes people, when time passes, they kind of want to travel, they want to do further study, or they might just want to get a nice secure graduate job, which is sort of what happened in our team after a year of working on the companion app as a graduate business. Adam and I wanted to do our own thing with games, and the other two guys wanted to move into full-time graduate jobs. So when you are setting up a student business, it's important that you discuss what the end looks like beforehand. You need to write that down amongst yourselves. If I'm not where I want to be in X amount of months, it's time to call it quits. And make sure your team are all on board with that early, so it's not the end of the world if it does happen. And it wasn't the end of the world. My two friends, they went and got proper adult jobs. Adam and I decided to give this business thing one more shot with the minimal savings that we had left and fulfill that lifelong dream of making video games. And we were really fortunate that we were able to take that risk. Not everyone is in that position. From our perspective, we were still in this weird transition period where we felt like we had just graduated. While we were working on IVIA, we were still tutoring part-time at the university for some extra money. We didn't have any huge purchases like a house or a car or like any kids to worry about or anything. So it's up to what feels right for you and the other members of your team. If you do want to carry this on after graduation, don't expect everyone to be in the same situation you're in and be able to take the same risks that you can. So Adam and I had committed to this now, our new path. There's this game jam coming up, Ludum Dare. It's every quarter, and that was our test for it. If we can make something silly and have fun in 72 hours, then we could maybe do this for real. And we did. The theme was ancient technology, and we just stuck a modern day soldier into a Roman Colosseum. We had a really fun 72 hours just seeing what we could just hash out, and it was really silly and fun. Whitepot Studios was born out of that weekend, really. So we knew then we could actually work on a game and get something out, even if it was just a silly game jam game. So we knew now that we had to make an actual game. So we settled on targeting mobile because that would be easiest for us to release. And we set to work on throwing together a prototype for an endless runner arcade game where you are a little spaceship and trying to avoid obstacles in the tube. At that really early prototype stage, we mocked up what we thought it would look like using paper prototypes. So originally we were going to have the ship flipped to the outside of the tube to avoid things, but when we were playtesting it, that didn't feel right. So we ended up just having the ship stay on the inside of the tube instead, which brings me to my next lesson: to be willing to throw stuff out. It's okay to try something out, and if it doesn't work, the quicker you move on, the better. We continued development. We tested the game out with actual real people at a few local meetups, and we got feedback which we then implemented. So we tested it with different ways the player could make the spaceship jump up, either by swiping up or tapping, and ended up just having those as options in the settings menu that you could switch between because different people prefer different methods. So the lesson here is show your work early and often. Get feedback from actual real people, not just close friends and family. If you show your mom something you're really proud of and really enjoyed working on and it's not very good, she might not be 100% honest with you about that. So, we had key mechanics down, the core of the game was complete, but little did we know that was only the beginning. My final and broadest lesson so far is that making the game was the easy bit. It is all the other stuff around it that takes ages. And I'm going to drill down into what other stuff means a wee bit and tell you what things you need to do as early as possible when you decide that you want to release a game through an app store. The gameplay might be complete, but there's still a lot to do around the deployment and release of the game, as well as third-party integrations and platforms. Whatever platform you decide to release on will require some preparation. If you're developing a game across multiple devices, you need to consider the input methods as early as possible. Different platforms have different rules and quality standards for submitting to them as well, so that's something to look out for from the start. Looking at mobile here is just an example. If you want to publish your app on the Google Play Store, you need a Google developer account, and that has a one-time fee of $25. Whereas to publish on the Apple Store, the iOS, iTunes Store, you'll need an Apple developer account, which costs $99 yearly, and you will need a Mac as well. Again, it really depends on what your target audience is. For any store, your first submission of an app will have to be approved by a human being as well, even if it's for just testing with something like Apple's test flight. So you should always work backwards from your target launch date and have a buffer in place for things like store approval and manual submission. You're also going to want to have certain things ready within your store listing for your app to be approved. So things like a link to your privacy policy, you need a website at that point as well then, a tagline and description that's consistent across different stores as well. You're going to need screenshots and icons of the right size and a trailer or video too. So go and make those store pages and developer accounts as early as you can to get a feel for how they work. There is a really cool site called Brindy that has loads of templates of store submission images and social media images, like the exact right size of like a Facebook header, or the exact right size of everything on your Steam page. So you can download their asset packs to give you a head start for this kind of thing. So finally, there's a few other bits of paperwork if you're going to sell your app or include in-app purchases. If you are getting an Apple developer license as a company, you need this thing called a DUNS number. It's a unique 9-digit number that identifies your organization as a legal entity, and companies like Apple use these IDs to identify your business. An organization called Dun & Bradstreet maintains these. Sometimes a company is assigned one automatically after they've incorporated, but other times you'll need to apply for one, but it's free. And if the platform you're working with is based in the United States, like the Apple Store, if you're a non-US citizen, your company will need a US employee identification number. So once you have that, you fill out a tax exemption form. This means that any income you earn from your game is not taxed on both sides of the Atlantic. Blah, 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 blah. It's not as bad as it sounds. It just seems daunting because it's an unfamiliar tax and legal system, but it's generally straightforward to submit these documents. However, do always double check with an accountant first to make sure you have everything you need in place. So, with that out of the way, the app was done. We were ready for release and we called it Tubosity, which is a combination of tube and velocity, which brings me to a bonus lesson, which is don't call your first game a made-up word that no one can say. We have people call it Tubocity, Tubocity. We should have just called it Ship-2. but you live and learn. So yeah, the game, it was released, it made a wee bit back in terms of in-app purchases and ads, nothing groundbreaking, but what was really important, that we proved that we could ship a game. And from that, we were able to apply for local funding, get our first clients on board, and we've gone from strength to strength since then, basically. After getting UK Games Fund last year, we're now approaching the release of our first big title, Murder at Malone Manor. So yeah, my sort of weird journey from student to studio wasn't quite straightforward. I had a detour in between, did something completely different, but we got there in the end, which was the most important thing. So to recap, the 8 lessons: get some real world team experience before you go into starting your own studio. Get comfortable with the business side of things. Don't say yes to everything. It's really, really tempting to sign up for everything as like a student, really keen and eager to set up your own business, but use your time wisely. Don't spread yourself too thin. Make that mental switch once you graduate as well. It's no longer a student business, it's your real life business. And know when to call it quits. Be willing to have those uncomfortable discussions with your team members about what you're going to do if it doesn't work out, and making sure that no one feels pressured to stay in longer than they're comfortable with. It's really important that everybody's on the same page when it comes to that kind of thing. My next lesson, be willing to throw stuff out. So you'll rapidly prototype things. Some things will work, some things won't. The less attached you are to those, the quicker you'll be able to get your first game out. And show your work early and often. So go to meetups, get feedback. Just don't be afraid to just show people what you're working on. And finally, making the game was the easy bit. It's all of the other stuff that takes ages. So things like get those developer licenses early, get all the the financial side of things, like the tax form, the bank accounts, that kind of thing. And yep, don't call your first game a made-up word that no one can say. So thank you so much for listening. My name is Vicky Potts, and if you have any other questions or anything, this is normally where I do an FAQ, but you can just email me at vicky@whitepotstudios.com. That's VICKY. And yeah, thanks so much, and best of luck with your studies.